Gemini, someone is looking for you in silence. They haven't forgotten you. I will reveal who it is. Before the noise of the world takes over your day, I invite you to pause, breathe, and listen not with your ears, but with your soul. There's a subtle vibration in the air, barely noticeable, like the sound of a name whispered across time. It's your name, and someone, somewhere, is thinking of you, not in passing, but deeply, perhaps even obsessively. You may not have seen their face in ages, yet their energy moves around you, gently brushing your awareness like a forgotten song that stirs your heart without warning. For a sign as mentally agile and socially aware as yours, this silent presence may seem perplexing. After all, you're always surrounded by voices, stories, conversations. But this isn't noise, it's resonance, the kind that lingers in empty rooms long after the conversation ends. Someone is reaching for you without speaking, watching from afar without a trace, and yet they haven't disappeared. In this journey, I'll help you uncover who this person is, why they still carry you so closely in their energy, and what this means for the next chapter of your life. If this message finds you at the right time, consider a divine breadcrumb on your soul's path. If the word stirs something within, gently like share or subscribe, it lets the universe know you're ready to receive the full message. Now, let's open the first gate together. Gate 1. The echo of unspoken words. How energy lingers in Gemini's dual reality. Gemini, your world is filled with motion. Thoughts flutter like butterflies. Conversations spark like firecrackers. And your attention dances between realms seen and unseen. But amid this vibrant mental choreography, there are echoes, unfinished thoughts, conversations that never happened, messages that were typed, deleted, and never sent. These echoes are not just figments of memory. They are energy, and someone, somewhere, is holding on to the energy of you. You see, Gemini, what makes this moment so powerful is not just that someone is thinking about you. It's the intensity with which they are doing it. Their thoughts have weight. Their silence has structure. Their longing is not vague. It's specific. This is not someone scrolling past your name on a screen. This is someone who remembers the exact way you tilt your head when you're lost in a new idea. Someone who still hears the inflection in your voice when you shared a story only they got to hear first. Someone who has tried, truly tried, to move on, only to find that your presence is stitched into the quiet corners of their mind. It's strange, isn't it? You, of all signs, who lives in the moment, who reinvent yourself with each new chapter, may not even realize the depth of impact you've had. For Gemini, connection often begins with curiosity, a spark of shared interest, a laugh at the right moment, a meeting of minds. You fall in love with thoughts, ideas, and the thrilling unfolding of another's inner world. But sometimes, amid all that beauty, you don't notice that you become the unforgettable one in someone else's story. The person thinking of you now hasn't forgotten. They haven't been able to. And not because they're weak or clingy or nostalgic. It's because what you shared awakens something in them that the world simply cannot replicate. You may have shown them a side of themselves they hadn't seen before. You may have introduced them to a rhythm of connection, quick, sharp, soul deep, that left a lasting vibration. And though you may have parted ways with logic or circumstance as your excuse, the emotional thread remains taut between you. How do you know this is real? Because the signs are starting to surface. Perhaps you've noticed them already. That song you hadn't heard in years suddenly plays at the cafe where you're writing. A mutual friend accidentally mentions a name you've tucked away in memory. You find an old message thread or a photo that hits you harder than expected. These are not coincidences. These are ripples. Their thoughts, so focused, so consistent, are stirring the energetic field around you. And for someone as attuned to vibrations and patterns as you, these signs don't just pass through, they land. You might be wondering, why now? Why, after all this time, does their energy feel louder than ever? The truth is, they've been walking a parallel timeline. While you've grown, explored, perhaps fallen in and out of other connections, they've been unraveling their own story. And somewhere along that road, they've realized that no one ever quite matched the mental and emotional intimacy they shared with you. They've searched for your rhythm in other people's words. They've tried to mirror your lightness, your wit, your depth, But what they found instead were imitations. Beautiful, perhaps, but not you. This realization has stirred something urgent within them, a desire to understand, to reach, to speak what was once left unsaid. But the fear of disrupting your peace holds them back. So instead, they search in silence. They visit places you once loved. They linger on your social media without leaving a trace. They ask about you carefully through shared acquaintances. They dream of conversations that never happened and wonder if, just maybe, you still carry a piece of them too. Gemini, your soul lives in duality. You are the keeper of two worlds, the outer world of dialogue and the inner world of reflection. This person who is silently reaching for you. They've touched both, and this is why the connection lingers. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't just romantic. It was telepathic, emotional, layered. With them, you may have felt seen in a way few people truly see you. Not just the quicksilver thoughts or the vibrant words, but the quieter side of you, the contemplative twin, the one who aches for meaning behind the movement. That's why you can't shake this feeling. That's why when you try to explain the pull, words fall short. And Gemini, you rarely run out of words. The energy between you two is not only memory, it is potential, unresolved, untouched, a frequency that is trying to come back into alignment. You may be receiving this message not because a reunion is certain, but because your soul is being asked to prepare, to reflect, to acknowledge that some chapters don't end cleanly, and that some silences carry more truth than 1,000 words ever could. Let's also not pretend this is easy. The very idea of being found, of being seen again by someone who knew your past self, can be both exhilarating and terrifying, because you've changed, you've grown, and you may wonder, do they love who I was or who I become? But perhaps they're wondering the same. And perhaps the space between then and now is exactly what needed to happen for both of you to become capable of a new beginning. What happens next is not just about romance. It's about restoration, about clarity, about choosing courage over comfort. You don't need to chase this person. You don't even need to respond right away. All that's being asked of you now is awareness, emotional presence, a willingness to honor the energetic thread that still pulses beneath the surface. Because that thread isn't just connecting you to the past, it might also be guiding you to the future. Gate 2, Gemini's mirror. When someone knows you behind the masks. Gemini, let's go deeper. Let's talk about what most people miss when they think they know you. The world often sees your brightness, the quick mind, the charismatic charm, the playful intellect. But few truly understand complexity of your dual nature. You are a mosaic of contradictions. At once light and shadow, present and distant, a speaker and an observer. And only those who have touched your inner silence, the part of you that doesn't perform, have truly known you. The person who is silently watching you now has seen that part. They may have entered your life during a season when you were more open, more experimental with vulnerability. Maybe you were younger, braver, or simply caught off guard by how deeply they listened. You didn't plan to let them in. You didn't think they'd make it past your filters. But somehow they did. And when they did, they met the version of you that doesn't need to impress. The version that retreats into poetry and pauses mid-sentence to feel something too deep for language. The version of you that asks, what if they leave after seeing the real me? They didn't leave. At least not immediately. They stayed long enough to touch your truth, and now they're haunted by it. This is where your story becomes different from most. Because while others might yearn for lost lovers or missed chances, this person is yearning for something rarer. The authentic connection they experienced with you when your masks were down. And for a Gemini, dropping the mask is no small thing. It is an act of trust, a soul-level agreement that says, you are safe with me. When that kind of connection ends, abruptly, painfully, or even quietly, it doesn't just break hearts. It breaks an energetic rhythm that once brought peace to your inner chaos. Gemini, you are not always conscious of how deeply others feel you. Because for you, thoughts move so quickly, emotions shift like tides, and there's always a new idea, a new story, a new connection pulling your attention. But for those on the outside, especially those who move slower and feel deeper. Your presence is unforgettable. They don't just remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. The excitement of discovering new corners of themselves through your curiosity. The freedom to be strange, imaginative, impulsive. The joy of being mentally and emotionally met without judgment. This person remembers all of it. The midnight conversations, the unspoken glances, the way you both laughed until words dissolved. They replay it not to torture themselves, but because they're trying to understand why it mattered so much. And they've reached a conclusion that it wasn't just chemistry, it was soul recognition. The kind of connection that goes beyond logic and into the realm of knowing. But here's the twist, they also know your defenses. They've witnessed the walls you put up when you feel emotionally overwhelmed. They've seen you shift gears when things get too serious, too intimate. They remember the moment you pulled back, told half-truths, or used humor to avoid saying something vulnerable. And despite all of that, they haven't turned bitter. Instead, they've grown. They've looked at their own part in the silence. And they've chosen to see you not as the one who left, but as the one who was afraid of being left first. That's the depth of their understanding. Gemini, how does it feel to be seen like that? Not just loved, but understood. Not just remembered, but forgiven. It's terrifying, I know, because if someone sees you that clearly, they also have the power to hurt you, to remind you of parts of yourself you're not ready to revisit. But what if they've come not to reopen wounds, but to close them properly? This person has changed too. Their silence hasn't been passive. It's been sacred. In the quiet, they've reflected, healed, grown wiser. They no longer seek validation. They no longer need the fantasy. What they desire now is truth, a moment of realness with you, even if it doesn't lead to rekindled love, even if it's just one conversation, one honest exchange where everything left unsaid is finally voiced. They want to look into your eyes and see who you've become, and maybe, just maybe, offer a glimpse of who they become too. But here's where your power returns to the story, Gemini. You get to choose how you respond. You are not obligated to reopen old wounds. You are not required to say yes to every return. But what the cosmos asks of you now is clarity, integrity, to acknowledge what you truly feel and not what you think you should feel. Because this isn't just about a person reaching out. It's about your relationship with your own past. Have you made peace with the parts of yourself that were alive in that connection? Or have you buried them so deeply that even you can't hear their voice anymore? That's the gift this person brings. Not just the possibility of reconnection, but the opportunity to remember who you were when your heart was most open and decide consciously whether you want to reclaim that openness. They are trying to find you not just in space, but in timing, the right time. And maybe this is the right time. Maybe the universe has finally aligned your growth with theirs. Maybe your readiness is calling their courage into form. But know this, their pursuit is not casual. They are not curious because they're bored. They are not checking it out of nostalgia. They're being drawn by a force they don't fully understand, but deeply trust. And part of that force is you, your memory, your essence, the way your words once made their world make sense again. So the question, dear Gemini, is not just who is looking for me, it's what version of me are they looking for? And do I want to be found as that version or as who I am now? Because soon, the mask will come off again, not through performance, but through truth. And this time, the mirror won't lie. Gate 3. When Gemini feels a shift, signs, synchronicities, and the magnetic pull of energetic connection. Gemini, you live at the edge of sensation and perception. You are ruled by Mercury, the messenger, the weaver of stories, the conductor of connections. That makes you uniquely tuned to the subtle signals the universe sends. Flashes of insight, chant encounters, dreams that carry echoes of conversations you never had. But lately, something's different. The noise isn't just noise. The coincidences aren't just chance. And the dreams, they feel more like memories waiting to happen again. This is how you know someone is energetically pulling on the thread that ties you to them. You've likely noticed it already. A familiar name that appears out of nowhere, on your screen, in a conversation, in a song lyric. an old photo that resurfaces, not because you search for it, but because the algorithm, or perhaps something higher, nudged it forward. The way a certain sense stops you mid-step and transports you to a moment you thought you'd forgotten. These are not isolated incidents. These are symptoms of resonance. Someone is thinking of you with such intensity, such consistency, that it's creating ripples in your energetic field. And you, Gemini, sensitive and curious as you are, feel the tremors before anyone else. Unlike earth signs who wait for proof, or water signs who follow intuition inward, you analyze the pattern itself. You connect the dots quickly, but this time, the pattern doesn't make logical sense. Because this isn't happening in your inbox or your DMs. It's happening in dreams, in delays, in chance meetings with people you both used to know. It's happening in a way you feel watched, but not in a threatening way. More like remembered. You may wake up at odd hours with their face in your mind. You may say their name aloud without meaning to. You may even find yourself revisiting places where your paths once crossed, not knowing why you're drawn there. These are the energetic signatures of someone who is actively and silently reaching for you. And here's what makes it even more powerful. Their thoughts are not just nostalgic, they're focused, intentional. They're asking questions through the ethers, and you're responding subconsciously but undeniably. Have you felt waves of emotion that don't belong to you? Sudden sadness? Longing that seems disconnected from your present life? That's them. Their emotional current is brushing against yours, reminding you of something you didn't realize was still alive in you. Why now? Because something in their life has shifted. A relationship has ended. A truth has finally landed. A wound has resurfaced. Or simply, time has passed, and with it, clarity has grown. They're no longer running from what they felt with you. They're no longer ashamed of how deeply they were affected. They've accepted that you, Gemini, weren't just a chapter. You were a turning point. And so they've started sending energy, intentionally or not. It begins subtly, through thoughts, daydreams, longing. But soon, it transforms into action, checking your social media but never interacting, asking mutual friends how you've been, planning to visit cities or places you once talked about together, even updating something in their own life, because they remember your voice encouraging them to do so. Every move, however small, is part of a quiet build-up toward reconnection. And still they hesitate, because they know that you, Gemini, don't open the same way twice. You're not the same person they knew. You've grown new layers, developed new defenses. You've been through storms they weren't there for. And yet, they hope. They hope you still carry the blueprint of what you once shared. They hope you still smile at the same references. That some part of your world still has space for their presence. The universe responds to hope like that. And that's why you're seeing signs. Because their energy is sincere, unforced, and anchored in something real. The cosmos is creating bridges where there were once walls. It's orchestrating encounters, aligning timing, bending reality in small but undeniable ways so that you can feel the pulse of what's returning. So, what do you do with this, Gemini? How do you interpret a magnetic pull that has no words, no roadmap, no certainty? First, you acknowledge it, not with fear, not with overthinking, but with presence. Yes, you whisper to yourself, something is happening, and then you listen, not to the noise of your mind, but to the deeper knowing beneath it, the quiet awareness that someone is near, emotionally if not physically, that someone still holds you gently in their thoughts. Second, you stay open without spiraling. The Gemini mind is a kaleidoscope, capable of 1,000 scenarios in a single hour. But this isn't the time for fantasy or fear. This is the time for discernment. Ask yourself, what do I actually feel when I think of them? Not what you want to feel, not what you're afraid you'll feel, but what arises spontaneously: warmth, curiosity, resistance, sadness? The answer isn't right or wrong. It's just the beginning of clarity. Third, you allow synchronicity to guide, not control you. When a message arrives at the right moment, read it. When a dream feels too vivid to ignore, write it down. When someone mentions their name, pause. These moments are not meant to push you, but to prepare you. Because when the physical encounter happens, and it will not come out of nowhere. It will be the natural culmination of all these whispers, signs, and shifts. And finally, you ask the question only you can answer. Do I want to be found? Because Gemini, the person who is seeking you, is not only looking for you. They are looking for a connection that once made them feel fully alive. But they can't reach you if you're hiding behind your intellect or your busyness or your old wounds. They can't feel you if you've gone numb to your own truth. And here's the cosmic irony. You are seeking something too. Maybe not them exactly, but you're yearning for meaning, for authenticity, for the kind of connection that doesn't just skim the surface of your mind, but dives straight into your soul. The kind that lets you be both halves of yourself, the talkative and the quiet, the confident and the insecure, the thinker and the feeler. And perhaps, just perhaps, this person is a mirror the universe is sending to show you that you don't have to divide yourself to be loved. So watch the signs, Gemini. The clock is ticking not toward an ending, but toward a crossing. One where energy meets intention, where memory meets maturity, where past meets present to create something entirely new. The pull you feel? It's not your imagination, it's your preparation. Gate 4, Gemini's inner dialogue, between fear of repetition and hope for renewal. Gemini, now we enter the most intimate space of all, not the external signs or the other person's longing, but your own inner dialogue. That ever-buzzing conversation between your head and your heart. The place where your logic analyzes, your memory replays, and your intuition whispers truths that you're not always ready to hear. If someone is reaching out to you, energetically or physically, it's not just about whether they're sincere. It's about whether you are ready to let them be seen again through the lens of who you become. Because let's be honest, there is fear here. Not loud, dramatic fear, but a quiet, persistent caution. A hesitation that asks, what if it ends the same way again? You remember how it felt the last time, how things unraveled, how your openness was either misread or mishandled, how you were left wondering whether you were too much or not enough. And this time, you're not interested in repeating that cycle. You've outgrown games. You've outgrown connections that shine brightly but burn out too fast. And while a part of you longs for the familiarity of what once was, another part wants to protect the peace you've worked so hard to build. That's the paradox of your current moment. You want connection, but only if it honors your evolution. You crave honesty, but you're wary of exposing wounds that have barely healed. You want to be understood, but only if that understanding is rooted in now, not in who you were back then. And this is what makes your path so delicate right now. The return of someone who once knew you is also the return of a version of yourself you've worked hard to integrate or leave behind. But let me ask you this, Gemini, what if this encounter is not a repetition, but refinement? What if it's not about going back, but about going deeper, about saying the things that were never said and hearing truths that were never voiced? Because this time, you're not the same, and neither are they. This time, you bring your wisdom to the table, your self-awareness, your boundaries, not as walls, but as invitations for mutual respect. And perhaps most importantly, this time, you choose it, not because it's familiar, not because you missed the past, but because something inside you recognizes that certain connections don't come to complete you, but to reflect you, to show you how much you've grown, how far you've come, how open your heart remains in a world that constantly tempts you to shut down. That's what makes this moment sacred. You're not a victim of fate. You're a co-creator. The silence this person has maintained was not a punishment. It was a cocoon, a space where transformation occurred. And whether or not they say it aloud, you can feel it. They carry new energy now. Less attachment, more reverence. Less expectation, more presence. So what does your inner voice say, Gemini? Not the one that's rehearsed in justifications or always ready with a clever response, but the one that lives underneath the chatter, the quiet knowing, the emotional compass that always tells the truth. Does it soften when you think of them? Does it ache? Does it light up? Your feelings are not linear, and they don't have to be. You can feel tender and guarded, curious and cautious, hopeful and detached. This is not about choosing side within yourself. It's about honoring the whole spectrum of your inner world. Because within that world lives a real answer, Not just whether they deserve a place in your life again, but whether you are ready to meet them from the place of emotional truth. Here's what I know, Gemini. You are more than capable of deep connection. You've just been misunderstood by people who wanted quick access to a mind that deserves deep reverence. You've been asked to dim your light for those who couldn't keep up, or to simplify your emotions for those who only wanted surface-level pleasure. But this person, they knew. Even if they didn't know how to hold it properly, they saw you, and that kind of recognition doesn't disappear. It waits. It evolves. It returns. That's why this moment matters. Because if you feel the door cracking open again, through a dream, a message, a synchronicity, it's not just about them. It's about you choosing to walk through, not because you're lonely or nostalgic, but because your heart is strong enough to handle truth now. Even if the answer is no, even if it's not what you expected, your integrity will lead the way. And what if the answer is yes? Then let it be a new yes. One that begins not with unfinished business, but with clear presence. Ask the hard questions. Speak your real emotions. Don't rush to recreate what was. Instead, co-create what could be, because that's where your gift lies, Gemini, in seeing the possible in the present, in taking fragments of what once was and imagining a richer, fuller tapestry with all you've learned. So if they reach out, listen not with your past, but with your presence. If they show up, look not for who they were, but for who they become. If the energy between you hums again, ask yourself if it's resonance or residue. Because you, dear Gemini, deserve more than recycled emotion. You deserve transformation, authenticity, and above all, the freedom to choose with clarity and compassion. Gate 5, the crossroads of connection, when Gemini must choose with both head and heart. And now, Gemini, you stand at the threshold. The signs are all around you. The energy is undeniable, and that silent presence is drawing closer. Step by step, thought by thought, you felt it building. The ache of something unfinished. The return of someone whose name never quite stopped echoing inside you. But here's the sacred truth of this moment. It is no longer about who they are. It is about who you are now. It is about how you will choose to respond to this surge of emotional gravity. Gemini, yours is the mind that travels galaxies in a single breath. You are brilliant, adaptable, capable of understanding multiple truths at once. But when it comes to your heart, there is a vulnerability few ever see. You joke, you charm, you deflect. But underneath, you are longing to be chosen for who you really are, not for the version of you that performs well in conversation. And right now, someone who once saw beneath your mask is trying to reach you again, not to manipulate or reclaim you, but to see if the soul they remember still listens when the world is quiet. But this is not a fairy tale. This is a crossroads. This person who has quietly studied your world from afar is building courage. They are not charging toward you with wild declarations or lofty promises. No, their movement is slower, softer, more reverent, because they've learned something important. Gemini's heart cannot be forced. It must be invited. And even then, it must choose to show up. They've made mistakes, yes. Maybe they left when you needed them most. Maybe they didn't understand the emotional rhythm beneath your words. Maybe they loved the idea of you, but not the full complexity of who you are. But time has a way of deepening understanding. And now, as they gather the courage to speak, to reach out, to appear in your life again, they do so from a different space, not of entitlement, but of humility, not with expectation, but with hope. You will feel this shift. You will feel it in the way they look at you, should you meet again. You will feel it in their silence, their questions, their willingness to let you lead the pace. Because this time, they don't want to hold you, they want to meet you, to stand beside you, not above or below, to co-create something honest. But even then, you must decide. And here's the dilemma. Gemini rarely makes decisions from just the heart. You analyze, you project, you explore every potential outcome. What if it's another loop? What if it ends in disappointment again? What if, by opening this door, you lose the version of yourself you've worked so hard to become? And yet, what if you don't? What if, instead, this is the very moment your soul has been preparing for all along? The moment when you get to rewrite the story. not to pretend the past didn't happen, but to choose what happens next with awareness, with honesty, and with emotional authority. This person is not your savior. They are not the missing piece. You are already whole. But they may be a mirror of the parts of you that still believe in magic, in healing, in love that transcends logic. They may be the voice that says, "You didn't imagine it. What we had was real. And I'm here, not to recreate it, but to honor it." And maybe that's what you needed all along. Not a second chance, but a sacred closure, a resolution that respects your mind and your heart, a conversation that says, "We were not perfect, but we were meaningful." And from there, who knows what can grow? If you say yes to reconnection, do so with full presence, not out of habit or nostalgia, but out of conscious alignment. Ask yourself, can I see this person without the filter of who they were? Can I stay grounded in who I am now? Can I speak my truth without armor? And if the answer is yes, even with trembling hands, then this could become something rare. Not just a reunion of bodies, but a reunion of truths. A meeting not of roles, but of essence. A chance to walk forward, not into old patterns, but into a new dynamic rooted in shared growth. But if your answer is no, if the energy feels misaligned, if your heart contracts rather than expands, then that's sacred too. Sometimes, the soul calls for closure that doesn't lead to continuance. Sometimes, honoring your path means letting someone go with kindness and gratitude. Either way, your choice is a ceremony. Your clarity is the liberation. You're not here to repeat the past. You're here to transcend it, to take what was beautiful, what was painful, what was unfinished, and decide what it becomes now. So when a message comes, or the glance, the comment, the unexpected invitation, pause. Don't respond from fear. Don't hide behind wit or strategy. Instead, breathe, feel. Listen to the version of yourself that's lived through everything and come out wiser. And then ask the only question that matters. Does this connection bring me closer to my truth or farther away from it? Because Gemini, you don't need every answer. You don't need a promise of forever. You only need a moment of realness, honest, whole, and free from pretense. And in that space, miracles can happen. You are not who you were. They are not who they were. And this time, everything will be different because you are. Conclusion: the quiet door only Gemini can hear opening. Gemini, if you've made it this far, then you already know this wasn't just about another person. This was about the version of yourself that still listens for footsteps in places you once shared. The part of you that doesn't just crave connection, but remembers it deeply, honestly, and sometimes painfully. What you felt stirring within these past few days, weeks, the sense of returning energy, of presence without explanation. It's not a mistake. It's not imagination. It's the quiet door of fate creaking open, just enough for you to see the light pouring through. You are not being asked to go backward. You're being invited to re-enter the space of truth. And whether this presence returns in a conversation, a message, or simply in the way you finally make peace with the past, your healing does not depend on the outcome. It depends on your willingness to meet the moment with openness and grace. And perhaps most powerfully, with boundaries that protect your growth and honor your softness. Gemini, you are not fragile. You are vast. You contain multitudes. And any connection that cannot hold all of you in all your duality and wonder was never meant to stay. But this one lingered for a reason. Maybe not forever. Maybe not for a grand ending, but for one sacred conversation. One soul-to-soul recognition that reminds you you are unforgettable, not because of how loud you speak, but because of how deeply you see. So here's what I ask of you when the time comes, and it will show up with clarity, with heart, and with the freedom to choose, not from fear, but from knowing your worth. Leave a comment below if this stirred something within you. Your story, even in fragments, might help another Gemini recognize their own reflection. And don't forget to subscribe, because what's coming next in this story is just the beginning.